this is a unique semester because we've always sort of had things going on the sides with this class. We've talked about these issues like Tom Brady in years past and what happened with Ray Rice on the first day of class 3 years ago. And then the first day of class this year, news on Ezekiel Elliott. We're talking about Ezekiel Elliott a lot with what's going on, and it's about to be in court again on Monday. And I'm walking over here like, oh, yeah, that stuff, which is like the biggest story in sports law in a year, and we're thinking, oh yeah, we got much bigger things going on right now. So two major issues over the past week that are directly in our wheelhouse, absolutely in our wheelhouse, about, you name it, commissioner power, player rights, player protests, social activism, more than sports, sports and law, sports and politics, sports and policy, sports and thought, sports issues bigger than the games. Exactly what I keep talking about. So that all falls in our lap this weekend. Direct rapprochement from the President of the United States. Then Sarah put together a great PowerPoint on that, which we're going to spend a lot of the class on, and then of course this college issue drops in our lap yesterday, which we'll start about. So the roadmap for us is I wanted to sort of maximize the NFL protest issue for us, and probably in the 4 o'clock hour, I asked Casey and Alex Ott to let the SLS know, which has a lot of 1Ls who have been asking about this stuff, they could come up at 4 o'clock and listen in. I also was talking to Dean Alexander, who's obviously very involved with politics, and he expressed an interest in coming to the class at 4, which was exciting, but then he called today and said he can't make it. He's got called away for something with the school. But I was talking to Villanova PR. I've been doing a lot of interviews for us about this. There's some sociology professor that's new, that's really into this stuff, that was excited to hear I was on campus and talking about it. Anyway, someone I've never met, never talked to, but seems to be into this, is going to come by at 4. And we will debate it. Wish I knew his name. I do know his name, I forgot it. But we will debate it. I will give you a lot of my thoughts, which are really, just go back to the premise again, that it's bigger than sports. And when the president has spent most of the past 5 days talking about the NFL, more than Puerto Rico, more than Korea, more than what's going on in the country, that's big. I mean, where are we? What are we doing here? So this course has now become political. I really want to hear from you. I understand talking about politics can be dicey, but these are things we have to talk about. Politics and sports, people injecting opinions. And I think the bigger issue, which we'll really delve into in less than an hour, is what do we want out of sports? Forget about law and what a commissioner should do, what a team should do, what an owner should do, what a player should do. What do fans and other stakeholders want out of sports? Because that's where the essence of all this. That's really the essence. My Twitter feed has been really a microcosm of what's going on in this country. Because I was at times very supportive this weekend of players and even of owner statements supporting the players. I don't think I'm radical by any means. But the vitriol that I got back was interesting. And just a small anecdotal sample, I have 230,000 Twitter followers. On a normal NFL weekend, I'll gain a couple hundred. This NFL weekend, I lost a couple hundred. So what it tells me is that there's something going on in this country, obviously. It's what we keep talking about. And there's a base of people that just want this athletic activism to go away, right? It's as simple as that. You can call it racist, you can call it anti-athlete, you can call it just stick to sports, but it's there and it's real. It's real. Again, some of the vitriol I got through my Twitter feed, wow. And of course, the president did make these comments to a raucous, supportive audience, which started the whole thing, of course, right? So I'm home on a Friday night, relaxing with family and friends, and I hear those comments, and I'm like, okay, wow. My world's about to change. Just a lot of stuff on the weekend with media, and then it's been constant. Because he injected the NFL into this. It's unfortunate. I mean, it really shows, it sort of brings out the base instincts of people, how they feel about this. So when you're out there talking about sports and politics, you have your own opinions. You have to be able to speak clearly about this because people are like, okay, you're in law school, you're taking sports law, what do you think? There's no right answer, that's the issue. There's no right answer. But what we talk about, and we'll talk about in depth, is what do you do? Okay, the president assails your sport. The president assails you as an athlete taking a stand. The president assails the commissioner, the owners, the league, the players. What do you do? And that's, you know, in my experience as a team executive, I never had anything like that. I didn't have Barack Obama slamming the NFL. I mean, never had to experience that. And you are weighing so many interests here, right? You're weighing the interests of the players first and foremost, I would think. And then you're weighing the interests of sponsors. You're weighing the interests of the television partners. You're weighing the interests of your fan base. And what I just talked about with the vitriol to me and others, you know, there was a lot of population in these stadiums last weekend that booed this. The networks really didn't show that. But they're out there. And I don't want to get into it too much because I want to have this guest and really go back and forth. But my worry about this whole thing in the NFL and NBA is what happens next. I really worry about it because I think there's this groundswell of emotion right now. Owners, NBA, Warriors, Cavaliers, everybody's on the same page. But that's not going to last. It's not going to last. It's not going to end for the players, right? But for the owners, they're going to want it to end. The NFL is going to want this to end. It's not. You know, I've had the Eagles' Malcolm Jenkins on my podcast a couple times. This is not like a 4-month expiration date. This is life. This is like as long as he's in the NFL and has a platform, and after. I don't think we as fans understand that. This is not going away. I think we're going to have some tension because the owners and even the NBA owners, you know, this is going to be a long season about to start. You think NBA is very progressive? Well, we'll see. We'll see. And I worry more and more about racial division. I really do, because we've already seen it in Pittsburgh. You know, the players are not on the same page. Not all of them. So all the unity we talked about this weekend, we're going to see if it lasts. I hope it does. I really do. I just worry. Okay, I'm going to put that on hold. It's a really tense topic. Not tense, it's deep. It's deep, right? I'm bearing some soul here. I want to hear if you guys were willing to do that. And my guest. So we'll see. Now, in the middle of all this, I have a long scheduled speaking engagement yesterday in Washington, D.C. Always like going there. It's my home. I see my mother. She's happy. And then I'm speaking. It's a group called LEAD. It's 100 college athletic directors from all over. All the major schools. I was meeting Swarbrick from Notre Dame, and Ray Anderson, who used to work with the NFL, is now AD at Arizona State. And I was going to give them an update, which we're going to do October 11th in this room, on gambling and where we are with gambling. Now, when they asked me to do that, I'm like, well, okay, but this is really like a pro sports thing. You really want athletic directors in college to hear that? Yeah, they need to know. They need to know where we are on legalization of gambling, possible legalization of gambling. So they asked me to speak, and I said, okay. So I come down there, and I'm speaking about gambling, and they're just nervous as can be. Like, what do you mean? Like gambling? We don't want our guys to gamble. We can't have gambling. And I'm saying, well, again, it's going to be in the Supreme Court. It's coming. Who knows what's going to happen if Supreme Court overturns this law? We could have legalized gambling throughout the country, state by state. It could be different. And of course, they're sweating bullets. Like, they've got all their problems with athletic departments not having enough money, not having enough compliance to deal with the sports they have. How are they going to deal with gambling? Are they going to have to hire new gambling people? Are they going to have all these restrictions in place? They're going to hire all these people? Oh my God, they were not happy with me because I was presenting something that scared them to death. Okay, that was okay. Then, while I'm there, this piece of news hits. College coaches, shoe companies, agents, paying all these college athletes. And guess who's making this news? The FBI. Talk about timing. I'm in front of all these ADs. This hits. One of the ADs I'm in front of is Tom Jurich, the AD at Louisville, sitting right here. So this news hits, everybody's looking at their phones. He's out. He's scurried out, quick, gone. And then the speaker after me, or a couple after me, was Mark Emmert, the head of the NCAA. And of course, everyone's asking about that. He's got his prepared speech, about college athletics and all you guys are great and all that. Someone asked about that, and he did what every good executive should do, which is just say, hey, it's 70 pages long, I just got here, can't talk about it. And he scurried away. And then these guys had cocktail hour. So it was just, the timing was amazing. And they're still meeting today, and I bet today, of course, is all about this. Okay, so my point is, we have a lot to do with historical precedent in sports law. I promise we'll do it. But I would be derelict as your professor to not include the topical stuff. It's just happening before our eyes. I've never seen a course, and I'm biased, of course, but I've never seen a course write itself like this. You don't pick a course, right? Contract law, torts. You don't have major precedent happening all the time. So what's the major precedent here? Well, we'll see. But I'm seeing tweets, this is the most important day in the history of college sports. I'm seeing tweets that say, it's all gone, it's over. The hypocrisy of college sports. I don't know about that. But this is a time to talk about it. Okay, instead of me outlining what just happened, who can do that? You guys have been following this. Anyone? What just happened here? Jason?
So basically, there are 4 coaches at different schools around the country: USC, Auburn, 2 other schools originally there. And the FBI investigated and found that they were approaching high school players and offering them money to sign with Adidas schools, and then when they were leaving these schools to sign with Adidas for a shoe deal or go to specific agents. So NBA financial advisors, agents, marketing people from Adidas, and college coaches were all brought under by the FBI. But then also in the report, it mentioned an unnamed school in Kentucky, a public university, and it gave a specific number of students for the enrollment. So Google told you the school was Louisville, and it said school X approached player Y and gave this family $100,000 for him to sign with Louisville and go to Adidas afterwards. So everyone figured out it was Louisville, and today they pretty much fired their head coach, Rick Pitino, and their athletic director. They can't fire him without cause. I think there needs to be like a 10-day period for him to try and defend himself, so they don't have to pay him because he's the highest paid coach in college basketball. But after 10 days, he's most likely gone because he's had a litany of scandals while he was there.
Okay. So what are the charges here?
I think there's bribery. I'm not sure as far as the agents, but I know the people that gave the cash, like the financial advisors and some of these assistant coaches.
Yeah. You can read with me here: 4 assistant coaches accused of taking bribes, $13,000 to $100,000, convinced players to hire Dawkins. That was a recruiter for an agency. Coaches were identified. Chuck Person, he played in the NBA a long time. Also arrested, this is what Jason just talked about here, James Gatto, a director of global sports marketing for Adidas. That's a pretty big title. Accused of paying the families of high school standouts to sign with 2 universities that had sponsorship deals with the apparel giant. Working with Gatto, Merle Code, advisor to Adidas. Jonathan Brad Augustine runs amateur basketball sponsored by Adidas. Investment advisor Munish Shood helped broker agreements to pay the families $250,000. The idea was that high schoolers would matriculate to colleges sponsored by Adidas, join the NBA, and ink a deal with Adidas when they went pro. Again, let's see if we can hear from this FBI. I mean, when you hear the words FBI in college sports, that's big. What's interesting to me is that I want to hear your reaction, because I get a lot of reaction to this with people saying, yeah, we knew that, which is kind of an indictment on college athletics, right? Reactions? Anyone? Rohit.
So my initial reaction when I heard that it was all assistant coaches that were arrested, I was kind of surprised at first that assistant coaches would be in charge of this and the head coaches for some reason weren't involved, but at the same time not so surprised that the assistant coaches were taking the fall, at least at the moment. And right now, Rick Pitino is the only one that's facing any consequences, and that's only through his school. So I'd be curious to see how head coaches at these universities are affected moving forward.
Do you think when a head coach says they had no knowledge of this, are you immediately cynical?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, as the head of the team, even if they say they don't have knowledge of it and they're telling the truth, they're doing something wrong, I think, because they should have knowledge of it.
Yeah.
Like the CEO of a company doesn't know what his lieutenants are doing is negligent in a way.
And we have some former college athletes in here. Any thoughts about this and feelings about prevalence? Will?
I think that obviously coming from a football background is a lot different than basketball because you have the AU circuit and you have a lot of kids getting coached as early as 8th, 7th grade in a lot of these different companies. And one thing that I thought of was very, at first I was thinking, okay, this has obviously been going on for a while. It was something that you just would think is possible, but at the same time, it's like, why would you even risk the blowback that you could possibly get if you're Adidas? I can understand you might get a kid that maybe that kid ends up being Anthony Davis, but how many of these kids, one-and-done kids, you don't even want a shoe contract out of, or you might lose them to Nike, Adidas, Under Armour, Jordan. So for something like this to happen, especially when you have the head exec over at Adidas getting fired because of this, it's almost like why even go through the trouble of doing that and putting your resources in other places to still be able to get these kids. And I think that is only going to start to go back down towards high schools and AU teams also. It's not going to just stay in college because obviously these other AU programs also have a hand in this.
Yeah, so what does the NCAA do with this? I mean, obviously, Emmert's response, Emmert is the head of the NCAA who spoke at this thing I was at yesterday. He basically said, I haven't read it yet, which is really running away from the issue. They have got to hold on to this student-athlete model, right? That's everything they stand for. That it's not pro. But this is happening, and the reaction of a lot of people like Road is, yeah, of course it's happening. Yeah, Gerald.
I guess my initial reaction as an alumnus of the University of Louisville was devastation.
As an alum or just a...
Yeah, as an alum, but I also thought my next question was moving forward, what's the next step for college basketball? Of course, Louisville is responsible for everything they've done as far as paying players, but I think that the NCAA kind of curated this environment of paper testing by doing the one and done schematic. You look back at the days of your Derrick Roses, Ron Anthony's, even think Dwight Howard, one of the last big name high school basketball athletes to go straight to the NBA. I think that they've had a hand in this too, of making this one and done possible. And I think that any university dating back to I think 2008 that has took part in the one and done schematic for their college basketball teams to be implicated here. So I think that they're going to have to honestly rewrite the rules of college basketball in order to stop this from happening. Whether they take a model that's similar to football or take a model that's similar to college baseball, you can get drafted, but you choose not to. You stay with your team or whatever. But I think that something has to be changed about it.
Well, you think if they're forced to stay longer in college, it will really change?
Or they could just go back to how it was.
Or have no, and come out of high school?
Yes, have you come out of high school. But I definitely think that the one and done schematic has maybe made it more prevalent.
Yeah.
For these kids to sign early with agents because they know they're going to go anyway.
Yeah, Jace.
Yeah, I completely agree with what you just said. My first reaction was, this is what happens when you try and treat a business not like a business, where you're going to try and continue to not pay the employees, because the only reason this happens is because the one player in this example is this guy named Bowen, who's going to Louisville, because he's going to bring in more than $250,000 to the program probably. So he's worth that much money to a lot of different people. And I think you're either going to have to let these players go pro out of high school, or, like you said, go to a football model.
Well, there's money allegedly being paid to a lot of football players too. It's here's the thing. We're at Villanova. Villanova has 25 sports, and one makes money. So what's happening is we have this two-tiered system in college sports right now, where we have all these sports that have the model that the NCAA cherishes and is proud of and tells the world, look at us. And then we have these two sports at the highest levels, college basketball, men's football, that are somehow different because they are revenue producing and they are more than that. They become these flagships for these schools. And when it becomes that part, then of course corners are cut. That's what we're dealing with here. Because when it becomes that important to raise the stakes in those two sports, you know what happens? People cut corners. Okay, I've been an agent. Maybe some of you want to be agents. If you want to be an agent, you want to get to the guy like this guy. How are you going to get to him? How are you going to separate yourself from the hundreds of others trying to do the same thing? Not only if you're a beginner agent, if you're a mid-size agent, even if you're a big agent. How are you going to separate yourself? And the way that people have traditionally is through unscrupulous means. Money, girls, family money, paying mortgages, whatever it is, cars. So that's just the agent side. And we were talking about all these stakeholders. Shoe companies, okay? How are you going to separate yourself from Nike and Under Armour and all these others? What do? Money. The universal language. Now go to coaches. You want this guy in the worst possible way. How are you going to separate yourself from all these other programs? Money. Louisville. They don't, if anybody would think you didn't need to grovel to 18-year-olds, it would be Louisville, right? One of the biggest names in basketball, the most well-known coach. What a history. They did it. Auburn, all these schools. So what's going on here? And I think, like Jason said, they are making a business decision that this kid is going to bring in more than we're paying. We will go to the ends of the earth to get him. And so what happens is, speaking as a former agent, you are now dealing with a population of people that has their hand out because people will fill it. When I go to sign players, I mean, this was 15 years ago. I'd get asked all the time, you know, what are you doing for us? Just very matter of fact, what's your sell? Not who you negotiate contracts for, not how good a lawyer you are. What are you going to do for us? I don't know how to answer that. I didn't have a slush fund. But everyone else is. So it's an arms race in college, those highest levels of college right now, where how do you separate yourself? Which brings us to the whole issue of amateurism. I don't know what the NCAA can do. I'm open to suggestions here. The one thing they could do is a different model. Just a different model. For those 23 sports, same model. For men's basketball and football, different model. Basically, pro sports. Because no one was paying me as a Stanford tennis player, right? No one was paying you, Casey, Princeton soccer player. Anyone paying you, Khalil? No. So most of the time it's not happening. Everything's good, student athlete, amateurism, all the noble ideas of college sports. I was the worst one on the team. I loved it. It was great. But not in those sports. Big business. And look what it does. Okay, we had a championship here a couple years ago. I convened a panel. I had people from admissions. I had people from development. I had people from different parts of the university. I said, what does this mean? We just won the championship. What does this mean? And you know this place, right? Very humble. We're Augustinian. We're Catholic, whatever. We don't gloat. We don't gloat. I'm like, come on, gloat. Gloat. No. Jay Wright, no, he's not going to go anywhere. We're good. We're Catholic. We're Augustinian. We don't gloat. I'm like, okay. A week later, we got a $25 million gift for a new pavilion. And I called that guy and said, why didn't you talk about that? Oh, that has been in the works for years. I'm like, yeah, but you just won. That's why he did it. Talk to the admissions guy. It's up huge amounts of admissions. Huge. Development office, giving way up. Admissions, better students, more students. So you see. And I talked to Jay Wright. I'm like, what is going on in this? I mean, this was a year ago. Not any of this just happened. He's like, you know, some of these coaches, they don't have any time to coach. He goes, I love it because I still coach. I said, what do you mean? He says, well, some of these coaches, they're just managing. They're managing so many families and agents and AAU coaches and cousins and uncles. They don't have time to coach. And that reminded me when I represented players, when you take on a player, you take on a herd. You take on everyone. I never dealt with the player, a lot of these clients. I dealt with the uncle, the cousin, the friend, the wife, the girlfriend, the wife and girlfriend. Whatever. Because they're just around. And it starts at that age. So this is, there was a quote in the article, this is exposing the seamy underbelly of college sports. I think most of us kind of knew it was there, right? We kind of know this. But it's a slap, it's a really a cold water in the face to see, oh my God, the FBI, this is criminal. Remember I told you all the areas, sports law, contracts, labor, immigration, broadcast, now criminal. This is criminal. I mean, is Patino going to go to jail?
We're not named in the indictment, but we're probably going to cooperate. And I think that there's 2 coaches involved, and I'm sure that the university has no problem giving those coaches out.
Yeah. Think about that. Giving people up. I mean, I guess this happened because a financial advisor gave up a lot of people, right? Wore a wire. It's big stuff. I mean, Jarrell was asking me, do I ever remember something like FBI going into sports? Well, I mean, the FIFA thing last year, that was initiated by the Brooklyn DA's office because it was like money going back and forth overseas, coming into New York accounts. And then, you know, Travis Tigard, a U.S. Attorney, went after Lance Armstrong. But I don't think I've seen it in team sports, pro or college. Anyone think of anything like this? FBI, U.S. attorneys involved? There must be something. Okay, so I guess my point is, if you're the NCAA, you're the commissioner, or you're a lawyer advising the commissioner, what do you do? And are you willing to advocate for a 2-tiered system, knowing you lose the amateurism aspect? Those are the decisions that sports lawyers have to make. because it's going to be tough with these stories to continue to advocate for student-athlete amateurism with stories like this. And again, we don't need to paint the brush, right? With all these sports, with all these with all these teams. Like I just said, Villanova's big-time college basketball. And even if I didn't work here, I would say, no, that doesn't happen there. I would. And I think part of it is the recruiting process. My sense is if Jay Wright sees that out there, they're not going there. They're not going there. They're just not getting involved. Now, again, maybe I'm looking at rose-colored glasses because we're here. But that's a rare, big-time program that seems to shy away from those kind of players. What are those kind of players? A-plus recruits with 100 schools after them. Now, is Villanova sacrificing talent? So far, so good. We'll see. Yeah.
What you were saying before about these same recruits having all these offers. I mean, in basketball, instead of a football class that has 26, 27 guys in class, you're maybe looking at 3 or 4 guys in each class at a lot of these main schools. So how hard do you think it is to really detect what schools are probably doing wrong things to always get these same recruits to their school? I mean,
Yeah, I think part of it is what Jarrell talked about with the one-and-dones, because it does seem like there's some schools that specialize in those, so you worry about them. But think about one-and-done, because you're out of there before the heat comes, right? So your point is a good one. When these players come in August, in basketball, the tournament's over in March, they're done. So basically, they stop going to class after the first semester. By the time that catches up to them, they're already gone. And in football, I've seen it even juniors, you know, where they'll finish the season in December. They're off to a training facility for the combine. They're done. They're out of there. So, you know, we're picking on Louisville, Jarrell, sorry. But this has happened before. What was the last thing? The strippers.
Yeah, there was an incident waiting at the team foul.
You sound disappointed.
Yeah, it was on campus. It wasn't a good look.
Yeah.
Not a good look at all.
But again, that was the coach saying he had no knowledge, right?
Yeah, plausible deniability, I guess. But he built that facility. It was named after his fallen brother, stepbrother. And they were having parties in the dorms.
Strippers.
Yeah.
Paid by.
Paid by player liaison Anthony McGee.
Right, and the assistant coach. Or he was a basketball operations guy.
Yeah.
And what happened to him?
I'm not sure what happened to him. We cut ties with him, and during the investigation, they found him. He was driving Ubers.
Uber driver, that's right.
So I'm not sure what's happened to him now. But we cut ties with him relatively early before Katina Powell had her stint on Good Morning America. I think that's when she.
Yeah. And Patino had his own issue with
Yeah, there was an incident. A young woman at an Italian restaurant.
Nice to know it was Italian.
Yeah.
That's a detail I wouldn't remember. Okay.
It wasn't his wife. So.
And how are you feeling about this?
I mean, I'm uncertain because they get rid of Tom Jerks. He's the AD. He's done a lot for the university over the past 20 years. He's the head, the head honcho.
Right.
And now that he's gone, there's no telling what's up or down now. There's no telling what the NCAA will do to us, whether it's the death penalty or canceling the season. There's no telling how the other sports will be implicated as well.
Now, I want you to answer this honestly, Jarrell. This is Jarrell hour here. You had any sense of this going on when you were there?
When I was there,
Yeah.
as far as paying recruits, I think there's a school about 70 miles down the street that gets a lot more wanted guns than we did.
Right.
But I mean, it's just a culture, I think, that of college basketball that we did. You know, there was definitely four or five-star recruits coming in and out, and it's like I said, no, people weren't really surprised by this. And I can see it's tough to see my university name, but you know, it's something that a lot of people had suspicion of for a very long time. And we're right there with those other schools.
No, again, you can't single out Louisville. But they got caught. They got caught. And we are now just talking about, sorry to keep harping on, we're just talking about the FBI now. The NCAA's got to weigh in. And so now you start talking about governance and commissioner power. Are they gonna blow up the program? You know, take away all the wins and titles and the Penn State, you know, situation. So, and that's the hard thing, because then you start equating, you know, child abuse and stripper. I mean, that's a tough. That's again why the NCAA is a very, talk about commissioner power. These things aren't in a textbook. You know, strippers is this, paying coaches is this. You know, there's loose language crafted by lawyers about things that we talked about with pro sports, like conduct detrimental, like against the best interests of the sport. This is exactly what happens at all levels. So anyway, we're talking about college sports this hour like it's a pro sport. It's exactly the same stuff. But there are rules against it. And we are seeing the blurred lines even more and more between pro and college sports. Okay. Let's take a break. Come back with a special guest. We're going to talk about this whole protest thing, which has dominated the news, not just sports news, but CNN and beyond, have joined in just to sort of listen to this debate. I talked earlier, for those who weren't here, about what happened this week, and obviously when I heard the comments Friday night from the president, I expected some real emotion to come out, and it did. And it did in the form of protests throughout the NFL weekend, comments from obviously Curry and LeBron and beyond. And cutting to the chase, what I thought was going to be the real issue to me, and this is what I want to talk about with our guest, is what's next. Because all the emotion and unity of the weekend, I just worry that's not going to last. I worry about the fact that owners made their statements and almost feel like they can move on now. Players do not. And I worry about race, because I think there'll be some internal disputes within teams about what to do, and we see it a little bit with Pittsburgh Steelers. I'm going to go quickly through some slides to just set up the issue for those who haven't been. This is sort of what happened with Curry, first of all. Curry was on a Fox interview before all this and said something about he may not go, and then of course the president withdrew the invitation, which hadn't been extended yet. So again, it was kind of like, you know, a Seinfeld episode. You're not invited. Which of course brought LeBron in, which, you know, he went pretty hard. And I think, you know, we'll talk to our guests about this as well. When you have the most famous athlete in the world just coming hard at the president, we're in a different world right now. Especially that last line, going to the White House was a great honor until you showed up. Think about that. As offensive a comment as there had been to a president from an athlete, I think, perhaps ever. And of course, look at all the retweets and the numbers there. We then get to the Warriors supporting Curry and coming out against President Trump. This was obviously echoed by so many NFL teams.
So my name is Glenn Bracey. I am new faculty in Sociology Criminology. I come up from Texas A&M, another big sports school. Jacob. Aggie in the house?
Texas people in the house.
Jacob anyway. This is my first semester here at Villanova, so I'm getting up to speed on how things work all through. But my specialty is racialized social movements. Like I say, I specialize in racial social movements. I worked on union movement for undocumented Latinas in Texas, then queer people of color in Austin. I now work on the white evangelical church as a race-based social movement, and I work on what I term 21st century lynchings, which is the contemporary events that have motivated Kaepernick and other people to speak out at the time. So this is kind of my honey hole. So anything is live and there's lots to talk about.
And what was your reaction Friday night, and what did you think would happen?
My reaction Friday night was
Have a seat.
absolutely no surprise, because I do think that this president is a particular kind of demagogue, and I mean that word explicitly. I think he uses our particular racial history to execute his politics. Sports is a central node for that because the disproportionate number of people of color in sports and people's unusual passions around their team and the fact that their attachment to their team is usually around family and neighborhood, things that are very core to their identities, makes it a place where people, especially politicians, really enjoy targeting to exploit racial difference. So I wasn't surprised by the president. I think that he was very skillful in using words like heritage, right, in Alabama, which of course calls up the Confederate flag issue and all these other things, right, to tie race very explicitly to sports and to use the language around our flag, right, as if these athletes, which code in everyone's mind as black athletes, are not part of us, the traditional America, especially again in Alabama at a Trump rally. So he's very, very skillful as a politician, I think, and it didn't surprise me at all. What did surprise me was that so many owners were visually apparent, on Sunday.
Right.
It didn't surprise me that the Giants, who have a particular history of stepping out on these issues within their ownership, were the first to write a letter making a statement condemning the president's actions. By the end of the weekend, you could see that people were more skillful because they brought in their PR teams.
Very crafted letters. Yeah.
Yes, right. The letters become less meaningful. The actions become less easily tied to the flag in particular, right? But they also become less tied to the original issue. Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
And you'll notice that if I don't know if you have a slide with the Sports Illustrated cover on it, right? The Sports Illustrated cover is a series of athletes, women's NBA athletes, which people forget was one of the first groups to have teams that demonstrated around this. I think Curry's on the cover, LeBron's on the cover, right? Series of people on the cover.
Roger Goodell.
Goodell is on the cover, right? But who's not on the cover is Colin Kaepernick, right? So the person who is the tip of the spear often takes the lion's share of punishment in terms of social movements, especially racialized social movements like this one. So those kinds of issues, after the initial reaction, those kinds of issues are pretty typical of racialized movements, especially when they become politicized through sports. How
did the Kaepernick issue, and for those who haven't really followed it, Kaepernick knelt a year ago, 2 games in the preseason no one even noticed, and then the 3rd game he sat, talked to a military guy, then thought kneeling was the better option. Out of respect, Nate Boyer from the Green Berets, who played for the 49ers. How did that issue become so intertwined in your mind with the flag and respecting our country? Because but Kaepernick did answer questions last year saying police brutality was the main thing he was protesting. And how did he become, like you said, tip of the spear? Do you think he's become that because he was the first? He wasn't the first.
No.
because the country's changing? What do you think Kaepernick represents right now?
Yeah, I'm trying to be thoughtful in my answer.
Yeah, well.
I think Kaepernick has called up race in a particular way, in that he grew out his hair and then he began to display his afro, right? Which calls up not only a particular kind of racialized movement, but calls up the more radical aspects of racialized movements, like the Angela Davis afro, you're familiar with, right? The Black Panther afro. So he was purposely bringing in some militants, and I think that that's particularly scary. I think that a challenge to this, forgive me for being blunt in our very first meeting, right? But a challenge around police brutality with respect to how African Americans are treated. And I say African Americans, most people think African American men, but it's important to note that trans African Americans are far more disproportionately targeted. But either way, any critique of the racialized power structure in terms of the ability for white state units to abuse people of color in any particular way is read, and I think consistent with our history and our documents, et cetera, is read as an attack on whites' power. And the flag is intentionally a symbol of American, read white, power and authority. So people may not articulate these things often or very clearly, but Colin Kaepernick kneeling and even making a statement about police brutality is an attack on what most Americans take to be the fabric of America.
And were you surprised that ownership locked arms with players this weekend?
I was surprised.
7 of whom gave $1 million to Trump.
I was very surprised. Now, what we will discover in the future, and this is one of the things that you asked, what we'll discover in the future is that the owner's interests become much more apparent, that the owner's interest was in sustaining a football team that they think will win lots of games and make them lots of money, but that the owner's interest was not, has not, and will not be in actual justice for the communities that their players come out of. Right? That will begin to be exposed, but it will be exposed in their silence and in their absence. The owners, like most wealthy people, have a series of ways of protecting themselves from being directly asked, targeted, and put on the spot around these things. So you'll just see them fade out as a group. There'll be lots of phone calls. And then you'll see players occasionally, and sometimes some experts on TV will reference, well, where are they? You know, especially when the next killing happens. And the next killing will happen in probably the next month.
What do you mean the next killing?
The next killing of a person of color that is perceived innocent by communities of color, and is read as an injustice by communities of color, right? And then there'll be calls on athletes, hey, you took a stand then, take a stand now. We have tape of you like taking a stand, right, doing the kneel, whole bit. If you're really about the issue, then you should be about the issue for this person.
Right.
And then the owners will be silent. Teams will have these discussions that potentially break up. And this is going to be an issue for a while. That's my prediction for the future.
Yeah, I mean, I told the class that I did tweet out some support, and I got a lot of vitriol. And I consider myself a pretty measured, down-the-middle person. I really do. And I told the class that on a normal NFL weekend, my Twitter feed would get about 200 new followers. And I lost about 200. So something's going on. People are equating this as an affront. I guess my issue is always, is the negativity coming from racial, or is it coming from what I feel a lot is just stick to sports? Sports is our refuge. I'm hearing this from fans. Sports is our refuge. This is not about race. Sports is our refuge from the real world. And of course, this whole class tells you that sports is more than that. But I'm starting to hear that more and more, where you sort of didn't hear that before.
I mean, it's not an accident that, hockey and NASCAR have made different decisions than basketball and football, right? Sports has always been a proxy. I mean, even when Jews were considered basketball, right? Like basketball was Jewish. It was a race proxy then, right? It's just that it's become a race proxy in a different kind of way, or at least with a different group. But stick to sports is particularly offensive when you're talking about a group of people who are among the wealthiest people of color in the country, are among the most known people of color in the country, and what you're basically saying is, dance for me, boy, right? That's what's being heard. I grew up in the Jordan era. I'm from North Carolina. And so, when Jordan was running, well, when Harvey Gantt ran against Jesse Helms, and I know this is old ancient history for y'all. Do y'all know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Okay. So Jesse Helms is part of the Republican triumvirate of the Southern strategy. Strom Thurmond, who started the Dixiecrats and broke up the Democratic Party in the South. Phil Gramm down in Texas, who was kind of like the institutional leader, and Jesse Helms was the money man. He was the first to really bring in a lot of money for Republicans through mailers and things like that. Okay, and all three of them are overt segregationist and racist. And so Jesse Helms had been in the Senate for 4 terms, maybe 5 terms. Harvey Gantt was a black mayor from Charlotte and was running against him. I think this is either 88 or 1990. And it looked like Harvey Gantt was going to win. And Michael Jordan, of course, was Michael Jordan at his height. I mean, like the height of Michael Jordan. And so they went to Michael and they said, hey, you're from North Carolina, you're a huge star. Will you throw your support behind Harvey Gantt and get rid of this open segregationist? And Michael Jordan famously said, Republicans buy sneakers too. Harvey Gantt lost. We in the black community of North Carolina have not forgotten that from Michael Jordan. And we paid the price for Republican leadership for several years that we think Michael Jordan could have done a lot to stop. Right? So stick to sports is not a claim, it's not a request for neutrality. It's a request for the continuity of white domination. And here we're talking about explicitly in killing people of color.
But with the athlete side, do you think we have seen with Kaepernick career, I think it's too early to say suicide.
I don't think so.
So I guess my point is, there's now a case history. You don't stick to sports, you have career issues.
Absolutely, but he's not new, right? Like we talked about Mahmoud Maruf, we talked about Ali lost the prime of his career largely around his opposition to the Vietnam War, right? I mean, career suicide is part of the risk. But he's a lawyer, so I'll reference him. Derek Bell, professor at Harvard. If you remember Barack Obama being with radical professors, that was Derek Bell. He's the father of critical race theory, which is the shirt I have on. And I did not wear that for class. I did not know I was coming. I promise. But he wrote his last book is called Ethical Ambition, and is written to people exactly in your position, who would ask him, look, you lost your job at Harvard because you demanded that the law school hire a black woman, right? You thought that was a need, and you were willing to give up your job for that. How do we, as young people, get ourselves in positions to do the right thing, and then actually do it and still manage to eat, right? And so it's a beautiful book, and I recommend it to everyone. But the long and the short of it is, if you think that you can have ethics and do the right thing without paying costs, then you're sadly mistaken. And if you are Colin Kaepernick, you're going to pay some cost. You paid costs in terms of your influence on Twitter. LeBron is paying cost, and as are lots of Steelers for their jerseys being burned, and they're going to be booed, and they're getting death threats, and all those sorts of things. Even when I started as an academic, my professor came to me and he said, Glenn, I want you to work for me. And I said, okay, because I was doing investigations of civil rights abuses in Florida. And he said, I want you to come and work with me. And I said, okay, great. And he said, but before you say yes, and then he reached over and he opened a drawer. And he said, this is my drawer of death threats. Are you sure you want to do this job? And I said, absolutely, sign me up. I was already investigating cross burnings and all that sort of stuff, right? So I knew the task. But that's the work. That's the work, right? And it's going to be expensive.
But it's more than what's happening in sports. It's obviously what's happening in the country, right?
Absolutely.
Do you think Colin Kaepernick would be signed if we were under the old administration?
I don't know. I don't think that the owners are that fickle. I think that he would have been seen as a pariah regardless.
Okay.
And this is my point, right?
Right.
What you're seeing, sports is just the area of the moment for this particular racial social movement battle. That's what's happening. And I've tried to lay out why I think sports is a particularly fruitful area for both groups. But that's what's happening. And so the cost that people are paying seem disproportionate to sports because this is not about sports.
Right.
This is a race war.
You worried
For what?
that this issue, social protest, bubbles over into, well, I guess you just said it, racial division further?
Yeah. To me, this is not a new thing, though. This is actually the everyday. Like I said, I'm giving you examples going back, 50 years, right? This is everyday. It's getting attention because our president has decided to use it in a particular moment, right? And did it on television, and he has a track record of being racially divisive himself. But this is not new in the least bit. You saw, I'm old enough to remember when Debbie Thomas was skating. Y'all remember Debbie, y'all know who she is? Okay, Debbie Thomas was a figure skater, and she was predicted to potentially win a gold medal at the '88 Olympics. And every black person I knew was around the television that night watching Debbie Thomas. And I can tell you right now, she fell twice. And we remember, and we were devastated. But then we were all gathered around the TV watching black swimmers, right? This past Olympics. It doesn't matter. We don't watch figure skating generally, and we don't watch swimming generally, right? But it's a proxy race war, just like it was with Jesse Owens. It always has been a location. Even down to cockfighting, to horse racing, all of these things that were big in the 19th century were big because they were race proxies. That's what sports largely is in the United States.
Questions?
Anybody?
Just tell them your name.
Hey, I'm Kari.
Hi, Kari.
Do you consider what Jerry Jones did in terms of kneeling before the anthem and locking arms as a form of counter-protest?
I consider it part of co-optation, right? So the protest is really about police brutality, right? And I think that even that has been a minimization. If we remember, George Zimmerman was not a policeman. George Zimmerman was a regular white person who lynched Trayvon Martin for being in a white community. Same as old school lynchings, right? But then it got narrowed to police brutality because that's more legitimate. Now it's being limited down to the flag, right? And Jerry Jones comes out in the most well orchestrated of all these protests, and it's very, very clear that he's not making a statement about the flag. And yet, in Jerry Jones's case, and so, since he's not making a statement about the flag, and he's clearly not saying anything about police brutality, what is he there for, right? And we all know what he's there for. He's there for to solidify the peace on his team, right? But he's not there for any particular social movement interest. I was going to make another point about Jerry, and I lost it, but I think I answered.
Well, supposedly he's now taking a call from the president, and the president says we're all good, or whatever that means. That's what he tweeted this morning, because he can't stop tweeting about this. Can't stop, won't stop.
It's not in his interest to stop, I don't think. He's winning. The president's winning.
Why is he winning?
Because people's allegiance to the flag is even broader than people's allegiance to sports. Stirring up white resentment is how he became president, and this is distracted from healthcare and a series of other things, right? North Korea, et cetera, right?
Puerto Rico.
Right, and so the president, the people who were shaky about the president are largely stirred by this and re-energized, supportive of the president. The people who are upset about this are already, lost to his camp. He's winning.
Interesting.
Having already studied social movements in the past, how many of those movements would say were successful based off of how publicized they were? I mean, in this situation, you see so many athletes, and you see it on TV all the time, and then you have a lot of people that are saying, okay, what are these people doing actually in the community behind closed doors, right? So how many of these social movements have you seen that have actually created a lot of change just based on the fact that you see them on TV before the big game compared to, okay, I'm actually going to do the nitty-gritty work that needs to be done in Southside Chicago?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So first off, let me address the premise of the question. Implicitly, there's the idea that social movements, there's a successful way for social movements to organize. The truth is that almost all social movements are crushed. Doesn't matter if we're talking about a peasant movement, a feminist movement, a race movement, it doesn't matter. Social movements get crushed by and large. So the success percentage is really, really low. The question I think you're getting to is, what's the issue of efficacy, right? Like, true change, if that's what you want, usually takes a long-term institutional effort that's often quiet and doesn't involve a lot of people on television. My answer to that as a social movement scholar is that social movements are most successful not when they get large numbers of people, but what makes a social movement successful is its degree of radicalism. So there are more people, you think about the march, the Women's March after President Trump was elected, right? What's come out of that march? Nothing that you can tangibly, put your fingers on, right? But
that was 1 million people.
Right, and that was 1 million people, and it was covered internationally, all over the place. Yeah? But you think about something like the 4 students who did the sit-in, the original sit-in in Greensboro. It wasn't really the original sit-in, but it's regarded as the original sit-in in Greensboro. That's 4 students. But what they did was read as radical and unexpected and launched a movement that did have real, tangible, obviously I'm sitting here, outcomes, right? So radicalism is the question. Yeah? And is when Colin Kaepernick knelt before the flag and did so by himself, and then did so with Fields as his teammate that joined him at first, and nobody even thinks about him. That was radical, and that got attention. This sort of thing is explicitly not radical, and you can expect it to wind down and have very little success from this point on.
I have 2 questions. So,
Your name?
Rick.
Rick.
Did you read Sean King's first article that he wrote for The Intercept about the owners ostracizing Kaepernick and how they kind of set the example for this?
No.
Okay, then we'll skip that question.
Okay, well.
Second question. So the next football game will be Thursday. It'll be the Packers and Bears. The players made a statement that's on the team website.
Right, they're going to lock arms.
Linked arms, and they've called for the fans to do the same. Obviously, there's a lot of really negative comments on the social media about that, on the team post. How do you think that'll go? And what will it mean, potentially going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you know about me. I was 10 years in Green Bay, and I think it's going to get some negativity. Even being out there, hearing that people are calling in, complaining about Aaron, supporting Kaepernick, complaining about Marty Bennett and some of the things he was doing. But Midwestern, humble people, kind people, I don't think it'll be anything negative other than some people won't join arms, and you'll hear a few comments, whether boos or... But you're talking about a very conservative fan base, very conservative. So it's interesting. You know, the players are now reaching out to the fans. Obviously, management had to approve this. It's a fishbowl in Wisconsin on that team, and it's going to be very interesting. You know, the Packers signed Martellus Bennett. He is not a player like the Packers usually sign. On the field, in terms of being a big free agent, and off the field, having vocal opinions. That's a rare signing for a team like that. Now, a team like Seattle or, you know, Baltimore, that's what they do. But it's interesting. You know, I wonder how they're thinking about what Martellus Bennett has brought there when they weren't thinking about this whole idea of social protest right now. It'll be something to watch tomorrow night, which I'm sure makes the networks happy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There'll be booths just like Arizona.
There were boos in Arizona? I didn't see that.
Large booths. Well, actually, the president tweeted about it.
Oh, okay.
He said, you know, he said, great anger was the president's tweet. And it will send a sign. Oh yeah, I didn't even know. It'll send a symbol of the level of threat, and like I say, the cost that will come with moving the attention back to what the actual issue is. Right? Players who make that choice will pay a price, and everybody's letting them know that this is the cost. But that's the cost, you know.
What if
Tell me your name, please.
Oh, sorry, Rohan.
Rohan.
Good to
What do
meet
you think would happen if a prominent white player did something? Tom Brady and Aaron obviously both posted Instagrams, but I think their Instagrams were more unity among the players and not really directed towards the true issue. Hypothetically, if one of these players actually said something about the underlying issue that Kaepernick started in the first place, do you think, and I'm from New England, so I know what happens if Tom Brady says anything, that's a word.
Yeah.
And they booed the players before.
Yeah.
If one of them said,
And they did on Sunday. I did read that.
Yep. If one of them said anything, do you think that might fall along the lines of the radicalism you were talking about? A white person actually speaking up about these issues?
Depends on what they say.
Yeah.
Right? Definitely does depend on their stature and the actions that come after it. I think Tom Brady is pretty firmly in the, pardon?
Bland.
Yes, bland, but he also is well known as conservative. You know, so he's at less threat than a white player who hasn't made, you know, like someone that we don't know politically yet. Like Popovich, we already knew who he was, right?
Steve Kerr.
Steve Kerr,
Yeah.
right? We knew who he was. We think of basketball as something where, okay, a white coach is going to have to be like, you know, race friendly, you know, for lack of a better word. So I think it matters who it is and what actions go behind it. I think the level of surprise is part of what adds to the radicalism of it. Okay, that's on the one. Let me say though, white players are not neutral. The silence is not neutral. The choreographed kneel, it should also not be read as radical, right? Like, I think what we're seeing from white players by and large is a willingness to let this go past and hope that it goes past. Yeah? And again, that's not neutrality. That is, let us get back to the norms of white domination.
And I spoke to Aaron when I was there. I mean, it wasn't about directly speaking on bigger, you know, in a more vocal way. It was just that the one thing that he said is he's very cognizant that when he speaks, it's much bigger than him. It's the team, it's Packer Nation is worldwide. Obviously the whole state of Wisconsin. He's very cognizant of that. So I don't know if that's restricting him, but obviously he's close with this new player, Bennett, and he's been taking, I think, more of a stance than Brady or some of the other guys. Other questions or comments? Your name?
Max Campbell.
Max.
I have two questions, actually. So my first one is, are you concerned that the issue is becoming diluted as it gains more traction. So I'm just thinking,
Yes.
when Kaepernick initially took a knee, he was alone, and it happened a while ago. It was clear that he was protesting police brutality against African Americans. But then people didn't really join him for a while. All of a sudden, you have all these tweets by the president, and it feels more to me that these people taking a knee now are more in a generalized protest against a litany of things that the president has done and why they think they might be wrong by him. So are you concerned that this is kind of losing direction in terms of what exactly is being contested or protested?
Absolutely. I think if I was going to tell you what I think most of the people who knelt on Sunday or this weekend did, what they did was a protest against the attack on sports, right? Like what they did was an attack on, was protest their feeling that they have a right to be left alone out of politics. That's what they were actually upset about, the majority, right? Not the issues. Not even the president threatening their jobs explicitly, right? It's just, we have a right to be left alone. Sometimes that's worth protesting over. That's part of the whole idea of the United States. But yeah, it's being diluted, and like I say, this is what I mean by co-optation, right? Like the movement is being turned away from what the movement is actually about.
And my second question, I guess this might not necessarily be in your area of expertise, but do you think that organizations should have the right to regulate this? I'm just speaking from a sense that, when a player takes a kneel, it's not just the player that's being associated with this action, but there's a logo on that jersey.
Right.
And it seems that fan bases are creating an association not just with these individual players, but with the entire organization and that point of view. So do you think owners should have the right to regulate this speech from a First Amendment standpoint? Do you think that they shouldn't?
I'm going to jump in. I think this is the key question right now, because it is the logos, it is the brand. And Roger Goodell was making a nice statement, and Adam Silver made a nice statement, and the Warriors and the Cavs and all the NFL teams. But, like was said, this past weekend was just emotion. It was unity. It was, screw you, Trump, because you're messing with our sport. You're messing with our game. You're telling us we're SOBs. But now what happens? Because I just think everyone's in their offices at management level figuring out, what about our brand? And look at all those people cheering for Trump, and look at the people going away from me on Twitter. Look at the people that are booing. There's going to be more boos. And what about that audience? I mean, this was easy before this year, right? They just sort of put out a product and we don't worry about this. Now we've got division. And then, as we talked about, I worry about internal. These locker rooms are not kumbaya. I mean, you've got people in locker rooms that don't like each other. You've got racial division, even on the best teams. And that will be magnified. And what about even black players that aren't speaking out? We've heard about Seattle and how some people feel about Russell Wilson being very vanilla. Probably not the right word. But are we going to see things like that? That's what I worry about.
To answer on this is a private organization, yeah, and so the owners, have the right to punish players for doing this sort of thing. I think it falls to us who see it as a justice issue to force them to do the right thing. That's how democracies and movements work.
What is the right thing in this case?
Advocate for the ending of police brutality against.
For ownership to do that.
I think
for management.
I think the owners and management and the league, the official league, all of those things should do. You can't have a league that's, I think NFL 70 or 74% black and see that as not part of your issue. You can't have a league that's 70, 74% black. The president says, don't protect the brains, and not see that as an issue. Like, that's relevant. I think they have an obligation, but that's not something I'm prepared to say, to suspend the First Amendment over, right? Or to claim a First Amendment right, I should say, to wear my, 49ers uniform and do those sorts of things. It's a political battle that's happening through sports, right? And the owners can use their power how they want to. I will disagree with how most of them use their power, but they have the right to do that.
Out there,
Go ahead, and then we'll go to you.
I was going to say, nobody's out there for quote unquote protest this weekend. I'm for the protest, and I still think what he did was disrespectful. Why is he not a hashtag? Why are people not particularly out?
What did tell everyone what he did that was so disrespectful?
He was straight up warming up, stretching during the anthem.
Oh,
like,
okay.
Kneeling, rolling around on the ground, like. So why is Shady McCoy not a hashtag? Why are people not especially outraged over him?
I would think some are. I don't know if it's like it hasn't gotten to be a movement, but I'm sure. I didn't even know that. Yeah.
Exactly. It's like,
Yeah.
why don't people know?
The kneeling in and of itself is such a height of disrespect, because because it is a race proxy, right? So if you understand that people of color making an explicit opposition to whites having the right to control our bodies, that by itself is already outrageous. Whether you do that while kneeling or stretching or whatever, right? So the lack of outrage is evidence of the way that race is already coded into the event. Am I making sense? Yeah?
Yeah, Nick.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, you mentioned that these organizations are more worried about their brand. That seems to be the problem, is that what's happening, they're taking knees, and it doesn't seem like it's working. Like it's making them more focused on their brand and less about the issue. So I'm wondering, what do you think, whether it's continued of this type of protest, but is there something that should change?
Well, it's working for the organizations, right?
Okay.
The organizations are able to move this from a discussion about police brutality to a discussion about the protection of sports and unity and their teams.
So how,
So
how
that's
can
winning.
the players try to bring that back to the discussion about police brutality? Because if the only thing people are worried about is the brand and the flag, it seems to be off point.
Yeah. So what's the next move for players if they
Yeah.
want to put this forward? There's lots of things, but they're going to need a new kind of action. Kneeling's not going to work anymore.
I'm Jack.
Hi, Jack.
You were talking about how all social movements kind of inevitably get crushed, right?
Well, no, not all. Like almost all get crushed.
Sorry, yeah, I wasn't trying
Yeah,
to-
some succeed. But
No, I mean, I was just thinking because, like, obviously, like, I think this is a hugely important issue, but I always thought, like, if Colin Kaepernick was, like, extremely educated on the topic, came out, made a protest, and then said, hey, like, these are actionable things we can do to prevent this, or this is how we can help it, and then get, like, all other players in the league, like LeBron James, having, like, something tangible to kind of provide the community with. Do you think that that's something that would actually make change, or it would still get crushed? And
No.
why aren't people doing that?
if we get crushed, you can crush something like that by just ignoring it, okay? Because people don't listen to a whole list of action steps and how to execute them. Because what that requires is then for individual people to look, be persuaded, and then go out and act. The way that movements are successful is through organizations that already exist, and people don't get organized. Excuse me. People don't mobilize by hearing a persuasive person. That's kind of the rhetoric that we have around like civil rights movement, for instance, right, and MLK and all that stuff. The truth is that people mobilize because the people around them look at them and they think, oh God, if I don't do this particular action, then I won't have my friends anymore, right? So whole churches go out and march together, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whole teams go out and march together, not because they're interested in the issue or the action steps or any of that stuff, but because I don't want my teammate looking at me like I'm crazy. I want to still be able to go to church on Sunday, and so I better be at the march on Saturday, right? That's what really happens, and that's why when LeBron first came out with the the first statement I remember from him was the Black Lives Matter T-shirt, right? After things were popular and it became a thing where if you want to be read as a legitimate black leader in the country, then you have to get on board with this. But it's not like I looked in the world and saw the issue or heard someone speak persuasively and then I took an action. That's not going to work.
Jason.
Jason, I'm just curious as to what you think about Commissioner Goodell and how he's handled this. And hypothetically speaking, let's say Miller Lite or Verizon go to him and say, you know, we want to scale back our marketing? Because I saw Bo's issue statement. I saw something about Emmanuel Sanders on the Broncos. He issued a statement saying, I knelt in team unity, and it was like with his sponsor out in Denver, and that he's going to be standing for the rest of the year. Just what you think Commissioner Goodell, his role moving forward should be in the face of adversity if these sponsors say we want to start, you know, pulling funding.
You're asking what his role should be?
And what do you think is going to happen? Like, what do you think?
So those are two questions,
Yeah.
separate questions. Okay, so you know, I've put my politics on the table in terms of what I think everyone should be doing, including the league, right? And as the commissioner, I think what he should be doing is saying this is a league where, like I said, it's either 70 or 74% of the players are African American, where we've instituted a Rooney rule that as a leader for organizations around the country, where we have, you know, a particular kind of history. Like, he should say this is what we're about, and frankly, African Americans watch and buy sports paraphernalia disproportionate numbers to all the other racial groups in the country. So he has an obligation. That's the should. As commissioner, his obligation is to his owners. And his owner's interest is in taking the league out of this discussion. Because of all the reasons I said in terms of black participation in sports, on the one hand, in terms of both as viewers and as players, and white resentment for what's going on. There's no real good place for them to be, and so they want to come out of it. Goodell's going to lead them out in exactly the kinds of statements that Sanders and Bozeman.
Yeah, I mean, as Jason referenced, this Bose thing is just sort of showing exactly what I talked about. Basically, they sort of agreed that that was a one-time thing, and they'll keep his endorsement. Mm-hmm. So if he kept going, he wouldn't have his endorsement. So it was a one-time thing, he keeps his endorsement. Again, so it's kind of what you were saying about the co-opting. Even Colin Kaepernick, this fact always gets lost. He announced in February, you sign me, I stand. Mm-hmm. Remember that? Mm-hmm. That was his salvo to enter free agency. So he's never been a threat to do it again, but he's still not signed.
You'll remember Reggie White lost Campbell's Soup and a whole series of endorsements, right? Like, you know, greater players than him have paid huge costs.
Yeah.
Hi, Pat.
Hi, Pat.
Yeah, I'm interested to hear kind of what you think of, I mean, Luther Strange, who the rally was for, he ended up losing.
Yeah.
And you said Trump is winning.
Yes.
And Trump made the comments that everyone who kneels should be fired. Mm-hmm. And then a lot of people now. Mm-hmm. You have every right to be cynical too for everything you study, but maybe Trump's not winning? I don't know. It just seems strange that after all this and for the critique of what we've seen this weekend, on paper for the 1 week that Trump said these owners would be revered for, he lost.
Well, he didn't lose. So Roy Moore, who won, is, if y'all are familiar with Roy Moore, right? Like, okay. And as someone who studies white evangelicals, he's been a hero of white evangelicals for a good 15 years, right? He's more consistent with Trump than Strange is.
Why do you support the other guy?
Because Mitch McConnell asked him to.
Oh.
And he's trying to get a little support from Mitch McConnell. But even at that rally, pardon?
He still did support Luther Strange.
He did, but even at that rally, he said, if Luther Strange loses, I will be eagerly in support of the other guy, right? He said that on stage at Strange's rally, right? So we've known, and then of course Bannon was at Roy Moore's rally. So we've known where Trump's ideological bread was buttered the whole time. And I'll remind you that Trump's popularity in Alabama is something like 89%. And it's going to stay there or go up. So he's winning. His interest was never in Luther Strange. His interest was in Alabama. He's winning.
What's his interest in taking on the NFL and Steph Curry and what's his interest?
Everybody who's read as in the opposition of Trump, in terms of the front line opposition, like the actual opposition, is read as African American. He's going to win that war. I mean, you know, if you what's his name? Mark Lilla, I think, wrote in the New York Times, it was the most read op-ed in the New York Times in 2016 that the Democratic Party should abandon identity politics. That politics based on sheer identity is always going to work to the people in power. He read the whole election that way. It's very popular. He has a book out about it if you are interested. And it's persuasive. If you side with power, you win. You win. Generally. That's sad for social movements, man.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
but that's the truth. You know? Like, you know, Hillary lost women. Like white women. Ferrara lost by 20 points. This has long been a problem. And I'm bringing it out of race just to say, like, when I say power wins, power wins. It doesn't matter what kind of social cleavage we're talking about.
You think Trump's going to leave sports alone?
No.
It's not.
No, absolutely not.
Hey, how you doing? My name's Nick. I just have a quick question. Do you ever think that standing and kneeling will ever kind of switch roles?
What do you mean?
Like, do you like how you said that a lot of players are kind of kneeling in unity? Do you think that there'll ever be a point where they will view the players that are still standing as kind of protesting them for kneeling?
Oh, well, Villanova was definitely read that way, right? I think you saw a choreographed version of that with the Cowboys standing up all together before the fight came out, right? So, you know, and so if a player had still been doing something odd, right, that would have been, that is against the locker room. I don't know about how this particular symbolism is going to go, right? I honestly think it'll just peter out and we won't be talking about it by the playoffs.
In hockey, baseball, NASCAR, not a big deal because
Well,
they're
no,
not-
hockey and NASCAR are behind it, are behind the president.
What do you mean behind the president?
Well, you know, NASCAR, what was the statement from
NASCAR said that they would they would kick out any driver who
Yeah.
didn't stand during the national anthem. So that's
Exactly.
an explicit endorsement of the president.
Exactly.
I don't know what hockey said.
No, the hockey teams have said that they will support, that they would go to the White House, even though it's not even the time for them to be making that decision, right? So they're explicitly saying we are a white sport.
Pittsburgh Penguins, yeah.
Yeah.
That's right.
They weren't the only ones, but yeah.
Yeah.
So, you know, the teams that are clearly, the sports that are clearly identified with whiteness are saying yes, we're there on the president's side.
Wasn't there a college team that said they weren't going?
Well, my home, UNC Tar Heels, home of the classes you never have to take, just so Louisville isn't by itself, said that they couldn't find room in the schedule to go. Which is, you know, what you do when you're, and remember the state of North Carolina is Republican controlled and passed a series of bills last year, but the law that's the main one, is that if any of its schools, state-run schools, side with the NCAA around a protest, because this is what happened with the trans bathroom bill, then they will have to leave their conference, the ACC in this case. So UNC and NC State in particular were threatened by, and still are under legal threat by the legislature of North Carolina to not be in the forefront of any protest. So now this is the first protest since then, and North Carolina found a way to wiggle out.
Time for one more if anyone has one. Question, comment? So I guess my final question is, you see this kind of petering out and what? And it was a nice comment, nice talk for September, and we move on?
Yes, because this is the everyday operation of the United States. It's just that this particular, in this particular moment, sports was the venue. There will be another venue shortly. You know, it was public transportation for a while. You know, it was physically in DC for a while. You know, it's in sports now. It'll be in another venue soon. And since the major sports their financial interest and their particular political interest is in getting out of it, they will very successfully and easily just get out of it, and it will move to another place. But the thing that to take away really is that this is normal. This is normal. And for those of us who are engaged in social movements regularly, these kinds of threats, these kinds of fights, these kinds of costs, this kind of being fired, all of these sorts of things are completely normal. My mentors, so Johnny Williams is a close friend of mine. He's at Trinity College in Connecticut. And he put up a statement on Twitter that conservative activists found, and they threatened Twitter, they threatened the university so much that Trinity College shut down, the entire university shut down for this summer around conservative activism and threats. I had a student when I was teaching critical race theory make a statement about racist fraternities at the University of Alabama. And our security had to follow her around because she started getting regular death threats sent to the school from these kinds of activists. Like, this is normal. It's just happening in sports this weekend. This is every day. And communities of color largely know that.
Glenn, thanks so much. This has been great.
Thank you
really
for having
appreciate
me.
it.